Hi, my name is Kelsey Reed, and today we are going to be doing my solo podcast for my Ethics 110 class. Today we are going to be discussing my topic, which is interracial relationships within America, specifically with Asian Americans dating non-Asians. So for this topic, I did a lot of research and I found a lot of key aspects that I found relevant, and I would like to discuss them. The first one being that Asian Americans' perceptions about themselves, so kind of that idea about self-image, along with Asian Americans' perspectives about non-Asians, and on the flip side of that, non-Asians' perceptions about Asian Americans and how that may affect them. Okay, so the second factor I wanted to talk about is gender, and I want us to consider the question, do Asian American men and Asian American women experience dating similarly within America? Third, I wanted to talk about Western media influence. So with Western media influence, we have TV, movies, social media, and I wanted us to consider the aspects that how are this affecting us? How is the media affecting us? Asian Americans, white Americans, and all of the above are digesting the same media, and I want us to consider the fact that this media could be affecting how we interact with one another, how we perceive one another, and if that affects our dating habits. I also wanted to consider the fact that Asian Americans are in a unique box. So Asian Americans have societal pressures from the East and the West. So on the East side would be their Asian heritage, their family, and on the West side, it's going to be the America melting pot and friends, coworkers, and how Asian Americans kind of have to figure out their own identity within all of this and how much they want to assimilate to the new environment. Okay, so let's get into it. We're going to talk about self-image. The first one's going to be skin lightening. So skin lightening has been prevalent all over. It's very popular in Asia. Colorism is kind of everywhere, but it is definitely very prevalent within Asia. So the two subcategories we're going to be talking today is South Asian and Hmong Asian, because those happen to be the resources that I could find most available. So we're going to be using those for today. So Hmong Asians, we have this article, and it is Hmong college students' perceptions and experiences with mercury-containing skin lightening creams. Okay, so at this college, there was a population of Hmong students using this skin lightening cream that contained mercury. Now, mercury is not supposed to be on your skin. And when this population of students was surveyed on why would you put that on your skin, they said that they wanted to meet beauty ideals. They didn't really think it was that bad. They just wanted the achieved look. The other one is about South Asians. So skin lightening product used amongst South Asian Americans, a cross-sectional survey study. And in this one, it's talking about Indian brides. So on Indian culture values weddings very much. If you know anything about their culture, they have very extravagant weddings, okay? And like any other brides want to be what they view their most beautiful on that day. It's a very big day for every female. For a bride that's throwing a huge wedding, you want to be beautiful. So what they found was that these Indian brides were trying to become much lighter than they actually are. So they were either doing this with skin lightening creams, or they were putting on makeup that's way too light for them. And they were kind of trying to figure out what is causing this. What is causing this this such extravagant idea of colorism and being shown off like this? What they found was that there was parental pressure to use these skin lightening creams. So a lot of the South Asian Americans that filled out the survey, a lot of them said that there was a lot of parental pressure, and that's how they started using the skin lightening creams to begin with. And then also it showed that at some point that these South Asians did not value their health that much because they knew that what they were doing were wrong, and then they continued to do so. The survey was asking them questions regarding, like, well, did you know it was bad? And a lot of them acknowledged that yes, they knew it was bad, but they still wanted the ideal look, just like the Hmong college students. Okay, so now we can start to see a pattern forming, right? We can see that throughout different subcategories of Asia, with the Hmong college students or the South Asians, that skin lightening creams definitely has a connection to the colorism that's so prevalent in Asia and how that can be passed down. Asian Americans are no exception. This can definitely be passed down to Asian Americans, and it does raise the question of whether Asian Americans can still value some of those cultural values that Asia has, where they value the lighter skin complexion. If your parents have been teaching you to value certain characteristic traits that you don't see in yourself, you don't see yourself as an Asian, then it's perfectly reasonable that they may look for those characteristic traits with outside their race, and it may not be in another Asian. A perfect example of this is actually in another article. There's an article about this YouTuber called Michelle Phan. Article is called Imagining the Perfect Asian Woman Through Hate. And so this is a famous YouTuber. She has her own cosmetic line, and we're going to kind of dive into the social media aspects with the online community and what the online community cultural values are. Because yes, it is social media, but everyone that comments under there kind of gives their own perspective, and it kind of shows what people's opinions are. She got a lot of backlash because she's a Vietnamese YouTuber, and at one point she did say that the only thing that she liked about her Asian heritage was the food. So that got a lot of backlash. People didn't like that. But she also got backlash for people have accused her of wanting to get this Korean supermodel look, which doesn't really have Korean features. The article goes into detail about what that may look like, and they accused her of wanting to have a mixture between Western features and Korean features, which is very hard to do. You can't really change your facial features, but that's what the makeup gurus do. They try to change the original features to try to look like something else. Something with the new beauty features of whatever is in trend at the moment. So she got a lot of backlash from that, and that also kind of shows that idea of self-image. So with all three articles, it kind of goes into the idea that Asian Americans, or Asian American females in particular for those three articles, do not see themselves matching Western ideals. They don't see themselves being adequate enough, and they find themselves wanting to change to match whatever they think is trending or ideal in that moment. So that could definitely bring security down. Just like, Asian women, Asian men also have their own complexities when it comes to the self-image. There's two articles that I have for this. One is an academic article, and then I also have a newspaper article. And I do know that the newspaper article is not as scientific, but it does kind of show the cultural opinions about the situation, just to kind of use as a comparison. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly read a little academic journal, a little excerpt from it. The journal is called Asian American Men in Romantic Dating Markets. So I'm just gonna read a small little passage. The question of masculinity and Asian American men. In this documentary, The Slanted Screen, filmmaker Jeff Adachi shows that Asian American men are usually absent from Hollywood films. When they do appear, they are usually geeky and undesirable men unable to attract women. Asian women sometimes serve as romantic leads, but they are rarely paired with an Asian man. And though representations of interracial romance in films and television are still far less common than unions with individuals of the same race, in those films that feature a Asian white romance, it is almost always a white man paired with an Asian female. It is many of these storylines take place in Asia, and the white male characters inevitably fall in love with an Asian woman. Asian men are rarely romantic leads, and whether that's an Asian woman or women of any race. Okay, so let's talk about that. The headline for that little passage is "The Question of Masculinity and Asian American Men." So there's this like stereotype that, Asian American men are not, attractive. They're not masculine. They're not any of the normal beauty standards that Americans tend to idolize. If we talk about stuff like tall, no, Americans typically are taller. If we talk about facial hair, no, Asian men don't typically have a lot of facial hair. We talk about, maybe build, and Asian Americans tend to be a little bit more slender, while Americans tend to be a little bit on the bigger side. So those can all be kind of aspects about how Americans perceive Asian American men, and even how Asian American women perceive Asian American men. So there's a lot of stigma that comes with that, and it's definitely been affecting Asian American men because they find themselves undesirable because of how other people treat them. And so yes, Asian American women have insecurity with how they were raised up, but Asian American men probably see that on a more day-to-day basis with the dating aspects in America. From what I've been reading, I do not believe that Asian American men have the same experience as Asian American women, because Asian American women tend to be more idolized from a non-Asian perspective. The next source I'm going to be reading is from a newspaper, and like I said before, yes, I know it's not scientific, but there is some cultural value in a newspaper. So no, it's not scientific, it's not a study, but newspapers definitely can have some cultural value. Okay, let's see. We are going to be doing familiar ad trope, pairing white men and Asian American women. So it's kind of similar. This is from the perspective of a Hollywood star. Well, not Hollywood star, it's a writer from Hollywood. So it's by Paul Farhi, and this is a little bit of an older article as well. So yes, newspaper, and yes, it's an older article, so take the credibility with a grain of salt. But I did think that it had some good talking points within it, so I thought it would be something that would maybe add to the conversation. Okay, so I'm going to read another excerpt. The Coalition of Asian American Activists, known as the Asian Pacific American Media Coalition, has regularly raised objections to the image in meetings with studio and network representatives. Bill Hamada, chairman of IW Group, a Los Angeles-based ad agency, says, "It seems to be okay if the man is white and the woman is Asian. The community thinks that it typecasts Asian women as exotic or playthings." At the same time, Amada says, Asian males are just not viewed to be lovers, as being manly enough, sexy enough, or to carry a story or a commercial. The idea is that they're not strong enough to woo a white woman, so they don't get the roles, and are rarely paired with women of any race. Ads featuring Caucasian males and Asian females play off a long history of such portrayals, says Lalani Nanishmi, a professor and Asian studies scholar at a University of Washington. I think part of the comfort with those images comes from the way they affirm a lot of stereotypes we have already about asexual Asian men and sexually available Asian women. Okay, so let's kind of talk about that. So this kind of goes into multiple topics or key points that I was discussing earlier in the podcast. This talks about Western media. This talks about whether gender plays a role. And then this also talks a little bit about expectations. This is not really expectations from the East side, but this is expectations from the West side. So Asian Americans are now citizens of America. You know, they live here, but you know, they don't just come with a blank slate. They come and people kind of already have an idea of how they're supposed to be because, you know, we've seen movies, we've seen TV shows, we've seen on social media what we think is normal. And so, like, subconsciously, we put that onto Asian Americans, and Asian Americans may not even realize it. So let's kind of go into the gender aspects. So the academic journal definitely talks about how Asian American men can sometimes struggle with dating despite their socioeconomic success, how they have to try a lot harder despite being very similar to other groups. There's actually another excerpt within this article that I would like to read. Another excerpt from the academic article is, earnings and education are critical in men's marriage prospects, yet Asian American men who have high levels in both are marginalized in marriage markets. So if we use that comparison, we show that Asian American men can have everything that a white man has. Like, Asian American men can have the same pay as a white man, or have a high level of education as the same white man, and he still might have to compete to date an Asian American woman versus the white man. So I just think that's interesting because in Asia he could possibly be very well in demand. If he makes a lot of money, he has a good education, he comes from a good background, he could be very in demand in another location. But since he is in America with different ideals of, what's to be considered as attractive, he may struggle a little. Okay, so we kind of talked a lot about the key points that I wanted to talk about today. We talked about self-image, for Asian American women being influenced by social media, or the cultural norms or expectations, and how that can be passed down. We talked about Hmong college students. We talked about South Asians with the skin lightening creams. Then we also talked about a Vietnamese YouTuber saying that she didn't really like to be Asian and she wasn't proud of her Asian features, that she kind of wanted to blend between Korean features and Western features just so that she could stand out a little bit. We also talked about Asian men and how their self-image was a reflection on how society has been treating them as kind of bottom of the barrel in the dating aspect within America. Despite their high education or despite their high economic status, they still kind of have to compete with other groups, even though, it should be more on an equal playing field. But since American idealizes different features than what an Asian American man typically has, then, he has to compensate somewhere else where he really shouldn't have to. And then we also talked about, like how colorism can be passed down. So, how colorism can be passed down, and so they may look for those features in outside of their race group than what they normally have. And if they are already being taught to have a negative self-image, then it makes perfect sense that in America that they would be kind of more open to explore different options, and see how they try to fit into that. We did talk about how they have societal expectations from the East and the West. I didn't really talk about it too much, but there was one more source that I did want to talk about. It's the American Family by Duda Karen, and that was there's an entire section in there that talks about kind of what I've been talking about throughout the entire podcast, about how Asians struggle to kind of meet expectations from the East and the West about dating or their perspectives. So that's a great resource to also go into. I will link it. I'll put it in my citations. And yeah, we talked about Asian men in Hollywood. We talked about how they seem to be undesirable throughout different films, or not even shown at all. Asian Americans, or even Asians in general, actually have a very, very little TV time or movie time inside, like Hollywood. The only one I can really think of is Crazy Rich Asians, and that entire cast was Asian, but that's not typically the norm. It's becoming more prevalent now, but when you did see Asians on TV or in a movie, it was typically an Asian woman matched with a white man, and you never really see Asian men and Asian women together except for maybe a recent TV show. I believe it's like Off the Boat. I've seen it a few times, but that's a cool movie too, a cool TV show. But yeah, we talked about a lot. We talked about Hollywood. We talked about men not having success despite their economic success. A YouTuber, Hmong college students, some South Asians and their weddings. And I hope that you enjoyed the podcast. This was actually a very fun, interesting topic, and this was a fun experience, and I hope you enjoyed listening. Thank you. Bye-bye.